Okay, so here we are at inside the house here on the computer, just doing a screen capture this time because I'm not showing how to do it. I'm just kind of talking through some things here with the sort of final internal modifications and consideration that you want to do. I'm not sure how this looks from where you guys are. I have two monitors here, and they're dissimilar sizes, so I'm probably won't be sure exactly what you're seeing here, but we're going to give it a shot anyway. It's been a long time since I've done some screen capture video, but anyway, internal modification. So far during the course in hot rodding your little mud motor, we've modified the intake, you've modified the exhaust, you've modified the carburetor, you've chosen an engine, and you know that just leave the governor alone if you're using one of the utility engines that I'm talking about. You've broken in the engine, and you've hopefully have reached a point where you've done the initial broke in and run in and changed the oil to something like what the Royal Purple and the Best Line engine treatment. So your motor's up and ready to go. One of the things that I one of the things that I um, you know say is that once you kind of this is a maddening process. Okay, go look up videos of guys who build drag racers and drag racing cars, and I know some of these guys, and it is a maddening process. I mean, there is no limit to the amount of money you can spend. Okay, so what we want to do is, for those of you where just the little internal mods are just not enough, and you really are wanting to go to like a whole other level to where you're wanting to just make a speed demon slash evil Knievel little motor. What do you do from there? Well, from that point, what you need to do is start considering internal modifications to into the engine. Now, all of this stuff is based on how engines make horsepower. I didn't cover that much here. I just talked about making the mods themselves. But what makes engines make horsepower by burning more fuel, and fuel is gasoline and air. And the more air and gasoline that you can cram inside the motor, okay, or the bigger the bang you can make inside the motor, the more horsepower you're going to get. This is why V8s have like twice as much horsepower as four-cylinder engines, or they're burning twice as much fuel. That's why. And all this thing modifications that we've made have allowed you, the intake sucks in a lot more air. The carburetor mods, because of the Venturi effect, sucks up a lot more gas. That gets all dumped inside that same cylinder. You get a bigger bang because you have now crammed more air and fuel, and the exhaust gets all that spent gas out, so you can then put more air and fuel in. And that's how it works. You can do the same thing now. For instance, engine compression. Over here on engine compression. Now, what engine compression is when that cylinder, when you put the gas and the fuel inside the cylinder, and the cylinder head comes up, or the piston comes up, it compresses that air, and with it's a 9-to-1 compression ratio. It compresses the fuel mixture about 9 times to the what the normal air pressure would be. And so one way to increase horsepower is to increase compression ratio. I know with the what is the name of the Predator engines that I use, they come with about a 9-to-1 compression ratio, which is good. But if you use a smaller GX 160 head, if you make that modification, you'll get an extra horsepower because you're cramming the same amount of fuel into a smaller cylinder. Therefore, you increase the compression ratio, right? And so you go with about a 10-to-1, and they'll give you about an extra horse over that. Another thing is engine timing. When you have increased compression ratio, you can advance the timing so that the engine creates a spark a little bit earlier, and you can use higher octane gasolines, and that can do it. But the last thing you want to do is to have the engine firing off when the piston's in the wrong position. So you can advance the engine timing, and that'll help you with power. Another thing to create more power in a motor is to lighten up the components. And one of the probably the biggest component, the easiest component to lighten up is the flywheel. The stock flywheels are just not designed to run more than about 3,600, 3,800, 4,000 RPM like that. And if you really want to get some more performance, you put a higher performance flywheel, which is billeted. I mean, it's lighter, and probably I think some of them have like a bigger magnet in it. So when the magnetos roll around, you take a magnet and put it in motion, it creates electricity, right? Electromagnet, and that's basically what the magneto is. And the magnet that's in there is a little bit bigger magnet, and it creates a bigger spark, and so that bigger spark makes a bigger bang in the motor. And the reason why lightweight is so great is because the engine is always having to spend energy. Let me turn down the gain here on my end a little bit. It's a little bit too loud in my ears. Okay, so the engine spins around. It has to use horsepower to just keep itself running, right? So one way to get more horsepower is to, reduce the amount of weight the components in the engine have, so that the engine doesn't have to spend as much energy just to keep itself running. It can take that extra energy and put it towards the propeller. That's what you want, and that's the main purpose of going with a performance flywheel. Now, a performance flywheel usually costs about as much as as a new Predator engine itself. You're gonna pay about $100 or so. But again, once you start modifying these motors, again, it's a maddening process. Cost doesn't mean anything. And the great thing about the 6.5 horsepower motors is that they're so lightweight. And if you can get a lot more power out of that lightweight, then I think it's worth the cost. Okay, so let's move on. We talked about compression, we talked about engine time, we talked about flywheels. Now let's talk about camshafts. Again, I'm not recommending things. These are some thoughts and considerations so you consider if you want to go to that next level. Okay, so camshaft. Now, again, with these utility motors like the Predator engines from Harbor Freight, I recommend leaving the governor in. Okay, well, if you leave the governor in, you're not making horsepower by higher RPMs, right? So what you're having to do is build your horsepower based on torque. So another thing to do is to get a camshaft that's going to give you better torque. All right, the Black Mamba Jr. is a great camshaft for this. Here's what camshafts do. The valve that are in the engines, one of the things that the camshaft does is it pushes a rod up that opens the valves that allows the fuel to be jetted into the engine. Okay, and when that happens, the amount of the time that valve stays open and the height of that valve is dictated by the camshaft. At least the height. The duration, really. How many seconds or milliseconds does it stay open? It's not whole seconds, right? It's just fractions of a second. But if you can get that valve to stay open longer, guess what it's going to do? It's going to skeet more fuel in, right? More fuel is going to get into the carburetor, to the engine, to the cylinder head to be ignited, right? You see what I'm saying? That's what the camshaft can do. Now, some of these camshafts, you won't notice much of a difference until you get into the higher RPMs. So what you need to do is make sure you have a camshaft that's designed for the lower RPMs if you're using a utility engine that I recommend. Okay, so the next step along with that is the valve train. You can actually modify the valves themselves. Remember what I'm saying. If you make the valve come up higher, if the valve comes up higher there in the cylinder head, guess what? You're gonna allow more fuel to get into the motor, all right, get into the cylinder head to be ignited. So if you modify the camshaft, you really kind of need to modify the valve train to get a higher lift on the rockers. I mean, a lot of you know who motors, the VTEC engines, was one of the things the big VTECs do is that they have like two sets of valves, one set that's for low RPM and another set that's for high RPM. But anyway, you can get some high lift rockers that will create higher lift on the valves, and that will make the valve move. And so with the camshaft, the valves will stay open longer, and with the high lift rockers, they'll open up higher. They'll just open up more. So you're getting more air and fuel in. That's the whole point. And then that's going to get more fuel in there. And if you had the big compression, like we were talking, and the flywheel with the bigger spark, you're just going to get a lot more horsepower. Once you've done all those internal mods, now it's time to come back to the carburetor and mod the carburetor again. You can either add bigger jets to it, or you may just want to go with a carburetor that's been bored out and all kinds of things like that. And so that's the whole point of a more carburetor, because now that you've done all these internal modifications, now it's time to go back to some of the external modifications to see if you can get even more power out of that, see. And so this comes to my final point in the course, is engine selection once again. Again, if you're just trying to put one of these little motors together and you just want to get a little extra power, this is the perfect thing that I'm talking to you. This whole course has been about. The intake, the exhaust, the simple carburetor mods, and the oil and lubrication, even, remember what I was talking about, the kind of oil and lubrication can actually generate more horsepower because it's less friction, and the engine's using less energy to keep itself running, and therefore more power gets to the wheels, or rather to the propeller, all that kind of thing. But anyway, if you really are looking for a total speed demon, Evel Knievel motor, I would recommend that you buy a racing go-kart engine, something like a one-box engine or the yellow box engines. Get on, let me show you here. I'm just talking here. I forget that I'm doing a screen capture. Let's get here on OMB Warehouse, for instance. I don't know why I haven't been talking. I don't know why I haven't been talking with the screen here and using the mouse. I've been talking with my hands. I've been doing too much live action video. Anyway, let's see if OMB Warehouse will boot up here. Stupid thing crashed. Oh, let's see. It'll boot back up here in a second. OMB Warehouse. Now, this is where I buy a lot of my components, and this is sort of a wrap up to the course as well. Again, if you want to come here to performance parts, and you just select your engine. I have the Predator 212, which is a great engine, and the engine I have is the non-Hemi, as you can see here. That's just hemisphere means the inside of the thing has a sort of a dome, circular, half circle shape to it, but this one doesn't, so it's just a flathead type of deal. So, and again, if you just click here to air filters, you can buy a lot of these things in kits. Let me decrease the gain again. This is the kit I bought, was the Predator air filter kit, 26 bucks, not much money, right? Okay. Came with you can just see it for yourself, and that does pretty well. You can get the upgraded kit. I think it's just the Venturi here is a little bit better. It accelerates the air a little bit faster, that's all. And but for what I want, this is plenty. And then the next thing was the Carburetor Kit. I bought a jet kit, 15 bucks. You see what I'm saying? And that's what the jet kit is. And that was pretty much it from warehouse there. All this other stuff I'm talking about, the Billeted Fly Wheels, you can buy these things. If I make another flywheel, if I do another modification, it's probably going to be a billeted flywheel like here, that'll lighten everything up and get some of those, that'll be a lighter thing. Remember things. So you can get all your parts from OMB Warehouse. That's where I go. There's other places. If you know some other places, you can go there as well. But what I was talking about before with the engines, you can come here and buy engines from them. Remember how I was saying a Harbor Freight costs you, Harbor Freight motor? That's a utility motor. It's designed for low RPM, snow blowers and lawnmowers and things like that. Any kind of power tool, generators, things like that. They're just not meant for racing, and they're not necessarily meant for high RPM used on a vehicle like a boat. But here you can come here, and this is the box stock project. If I buy another motor, this is going to be it. One of these sorts of motors here. Now you can get this 150 bucks. It's just $50 more than what you would pay for a Harbor Freight motor. Harbor Freight motors are retail for about $120 or so. and you get the coupon code for 20% off, and then you add the shipping. It ends up being about $100. So for $50 more, you can buy a dedicated racing engine. And this engine has, let's see if they have any stats here. I don't know. You probably can't see that. I mean, I can barely see it. But anyway, the motor already comes with, it's imported, but it's imported specifically for racing, which means it doesn't have, the governor was never built into it. The oil cutoff thing was never built into it. So all those things have been removed, and they've been replaced with racing components that can handle the higher RPMs. So now you can safely make RPM without having to do a whole lot of crazy modifications and all that extra work, and it's already done. And so this is made for box stock, builders prepared, outlaw, clone class engines. It's designed to make go-karting affordable. That's what this engine has done. And let's see if we can find, yeah, it comes with racing carb, comes with max stroke forged crankshaft, which means, again, lighter internal components. It's high flow heads, which is what I was talking about with the engine compression. Comes with the BSP2 box stock racing cam. So it's already coming with all these internal components that are built for racing. Piston specs, high flow heads. We've got the cam. You got the big crankshaft. You got the you have to select your own flywheel, but again, you just select when you're turning those higher RPMs, you need a performance flywheel. The valve springs, all these things are already racing ready straight out of the box. Then what you can do is take the basic mods that I've told you here in terms of the intake and exhaust, bolt those on, and you're ready to go. And they're claiming here 5,800 RPM as opposed to 3,800 RPM, 8 to 8.5 horsepower, just straight out of the box. It's just only going to cost you like an extra $50. And of course, yeah, you got to buy the intake and exhaust, but you're going to do that anyway. And so if you're going to do that anyway, why not just go ahead and get the racing engine and be done with it? Now, the only other issue is, will this engine fit? What you have to do is be careful, and I would talk to whomever makes your kit for your, like if you go to SPS North America, I'd go to Mr. Jobs and ask him, hey, would this motor fit? Or hey, what are the bolt patterns that need to be to mount it up? But if it were me and I were wanting to build a true motor here, a big ugly motor, I would start with a racing engine and go from there. And this and if you want to I would also check out the box stock project, boxstockproject.com. They're a cool website, actually. This is the company that imports these motors and modifies them just straight up for racing. I mean, you can buy a lot of components from them. I've not bought anything from them, but again, if I were to buy a new motor, this would be it, because it has all the internal mods done. And see, these are all the internal mods. I mean, if you were to do all this yourself, you'd spend hundreds of dollars. But if you were to just buy the motor, it's like $150, and you can just transfer a lot of those components that you've already installed from your Predator build. So, but anyway, that basically wraps up the course, guys. I thank you for taking the time to take this course, and I hope that this really helps you get the most that you can out of your mud motor. I mean, these little mud motors are fun little things to have, and I just have not found an outboard motor for the money better than these little SPS Longtail mud motors. There's some other companies that make mud motors as well, the kits or whatever, but Mr. Dobbs, his product, I really like it. I really endorse it, really. And the only thing he's ever done in terms of full disclosure is that I did a video, that really thorough video that a lot of you have seen, of me putting the kit together, and Mr. Dobbs liked it so much that he gave me like some he gave me like a gift certificate, and that's how I got the big tailpipe that you see on the motor here. And I got some replacement propeller, things like that, because I boogered a propeller, things like that. And so that's just sort of a full disclosure there. But other than that, that's the course. And go out, build these motors. Let me know how it has worked for you. And I will talk to you guys later. Good times, what did I say? Good times, tight lines. Thanks a lot.